That's absolutely fantastic, man. I can only imagine, and through the way you described it, I think a lot of people like myself just kind of wonder what it would be like to actually be in Kingston, and Tough Gong, working in Tough Gong, and just kind of, knowing, that it's smarter to just, blend in, and do the right thing and not draw attention to yourself and just become part of the culture. So, I mean, you had mentioned a couple of these artists, and you've that produced, working with artists like Bob Andy, Eddie Fitzroy, Half Pint, Dennis Brown, Gregory Isaacs, man.
Gregory.
What could today's artists learn from the artists that I just mentioned?
Well, I would say there's a couple lessons they could learn.
Okay.
First of all, I would say the first thing, walk it and talk it, walk it like you talk it and talk it like you walk it. These artists,
Right.
a lot of them, just the ones you mentioned, a handful that I felt very close to, Bob Andy, Eddie Fitzroy, Half Pint, who's still with us,
Sure.
Toots Hibbert, Gregory Isaacs.
Yes, to Tibbert.
These are men who, they lived their life exactly like the music that they sang. It was just an extension of who they were. They weren't,
Right.
They weren't doing this as a day job. They weren't doing this as a hustle. They weren't in the music business because they thought that, they liked the spotlight or they liked the attention. These are artists that were out there trying to do something positive for the world with their music, and still are in some cases.
Sure.
Whether they were spreading the message of reggae and Jamaican music and just happiness through their music, or something really profound in terms of a spiritual, cultural, or political message. And I think, that extends to the umbrella of a lot of the early reggae singers of the 70s and 80s, in a sense that this was a lifestyle. This was more than just a music. It was more than just a band they were in. When they stopped playing with that band, they were exactly who they were off the stage as who they were on the stage. And, and that gets to work ethic, which is the next thing. I remember Deadly Headley Bennett, for instance. Okay, he came from the famous Alpha Boys School, which was a legendary boys' orphanage in Kingston that produced some of the greatest musicians in Jamaica's history.
Wow.
And basically they were taught by a very famous nun there, Sister Mary Ignatius, and it was all about work ethic. She had one of the greatest bands, in Jamaica at the time. They had woodwinds that were donated, I think, by the British consulate, but that's where some Vin Gordon and Deadly Headley, I believe Don Drummond, some of the great early Jamaican musicians all came out of there. Yellow Man was an orphan in there. They took
Wow. Get the hell out of here. No way.
They took in these destitute kids that had no place to go, and they taught them. It was mostly vocational training, so they'd be able to have some kind of skill. But it just so happens that they had this amazing music-loving nun that had a sound system and would play on the weekends at the orphanage, at the children's home, and she put together this amazing band, and the Alpha School Boys Band produced, again, in some of the greatest musicians in Jamaica's history. But I remember Deadly Headley would wake up in the morning at the crack of dawn, and he would start his scales on the saxophone, tediously.
Wow.
And just practice, and then, go on to more complicated stuff. And then, and just the work ethic. And these musicians, they would have their notebooks, and they would get out of bed, and the first thing they would do is they would write a song. And even if they had day jobs, they'd be singing it all day long. And it would be more than just, like I said, it's more than just a gig. It's a passion. And I think that what today's artists and musicians could learn is just, this music has to ooze from every pore in your body in order to really be successful. I've seen the difference between musicians who go out there and they can make a good record and they can, excite a bar full of, intoxicated, fans. But to really go down in history to really make something that's going
Right.
to last generations, okay, I think that you really have to, have a belief in what you're doing, and it really has to.
Yes.
You have to comes from your heart, and you have to put everything into it. You can't leave anything out on the table. You can't be worried about what someone's going to think about you. Worry about someone's going to say about your political opinion, or the blowback you're going to
Right.
get because you have some kind of message. You have to go out there as a revolutionary, as a fighter, and you have to put everything
Amen.
into it. And I think that's the music that lasts over time. I mean, think about a Bob Andy song like "Fire Burning," or or "I've Got to Go
Yes.
Back Home," or things like that. I mean, it's just these are lived experiences, and again, you pour what you live into your music. These what you come from. You don't try to be authentic to who you are. I think a lot of people
Yes.
when a lot of young artists when they're performing reggae, especially maybe they come from America or they come from another country, they feel like, all right, well, maybe I have to overcompensate for that, so I'm gonna
Right.
kind of
Right.
out reggae the reggae guys, or come with a message that's more
Right.
come with a message that's a little bit more hardcore. But you come with the message of who you are, and authenticity shows up in music regardless. People can kind of sift out
Amen.
people can sift out what's real and what's not real a lot of the time. And although
They
that's
certainly
another
can.
issue, we can get to that in a minute as well with AI, because it's getting
Right.
more
Yes.
difficult.
Absolutely.
But
Yes.
the fact is that, so authenticity and believing in what you do, all that stuff, I think, is what young artists and nowadays artists got to do. You got to go all in on this.
Yes, 100%. That's. I mean, it's amazing that you actually said that, because I a lot of the times, some of the questions that I'll ask, especially if I have bands or artists on the show, is, do you make music, for yourself, or is it for, or is it coming? Are you trying to cater to the audience, or is this music like coming from the heart? Is it coming from experiences? And most artists, 99.9% of them will say, it's personal experience coming from me, because there's 8 billion people in the world. If you're trying to have a message that's going to please somebody, you're going to have to please 8 billion people, because my definition of being pleased is completely different than somebody else's, So that's when it comes down to, the true music, the beauty in music is from being authentic. It's being you, it's being yourself, because if you're trying to, to please an audience, I mean, like I said, everybody's definition of what pleases them is completely different. So you got a lot of work ahead of you if you're trying to, not be authentic and, try to please other people. But I think that's the beautiful part, especially about reggae music, in the mid 70s, when it really hit that nice fucking just revolutionary boom. You know what I mean? It got real hardcore, and they were talking about, the social justice and just really hitting home. That was coming from the heart, and people could resonate with that, and I think that's an amazing thing, man. It's so neat that you were actually there to experience it, and to be able to produce some of this music is just, it's mind blowing. It's almost like I'm talking to the artist when I'm talking to you without talking to the artist. That's a beautiful thing, man. So were there or what were the moments when you were in the studio when you realized that this is bigger than just the music, man? This is my life.
Yeah, well, there a lot of those moments. The studio was always sacred ground. I think a lot of those moments where I think this is life were outside the studio in Jamaica.
Okay. Nice. Right.
For
Word.
me, a lot of those experiences are on the streets of Kingston, hanging out,
Nice.
meeting artists who are young and upcoming, and and those experiences, and that's kind of when it's real. That's kind of like when you look around and you're hearing the sounds of traffic, and the vendors on the street calling out, selling their little items, and kids coming up to you and begging this and that, and taxi drivers offering you a car ride, and someone offering you a little bag of herb or whatever it is. I mean, you're just caught up in the city life of Kingston. It has a smell and a sound, and falling in love in Jamaica was one of the parts that really, you know, was early on, probably when I moved down there in the early 90s eventually. And actually, I was at the beach one day with Half Pint and just met a lovely Jamaican girl. You know, we were there for the day.
Nice, man.
And ended up being my wife and the mother of my child. So, you know, being in love in Jamaica
Beautiful.
and being young and being in the music and just going out to dances at night, just experiencing Kingston life to me was kind of like when I knew this was real and this is what I wanted to do, you know, and you know, I think the realest moment was probably when my daughter was born in Kingston. I mean, because that was
Beautiful.
probably when you really know that everything is real. You know,
That's cool.
The hospital was a very small little hospital. At the time, my daughter's mom lived on Constant Spring Road, and it was just a small apartment right across the street from a really dangerous gully, the Grants Pen Gully, which there was, at the time, this was the 90s. It was infested with crack dealers, and they'd come across the gully into the neighborhood. So things were really dangerous then. And the hospital where my daughter was born, St. Joseph's, I believe was the name, Riverton Town, I believe it was. And there was also a gang war going on there at the night. So we get to that.
Gosh.
And when I say hospital, when we got there, my daughter's mom was in labor at the time. And there was basically 2 nurses working and one other patient in the entire hospital. It was a pretty...
Oh, yikes.
The hospital
Wow.
wasn't in a bad area, but you had to go through a really dangerous area to get there. And this was kind of getting late at
To
night.
get to it. Ugh.
And what the nurses said, you know, were holding out. They weren't going to call the doctor until, like, my daughter's head was already out. And then all of a sudden, you know, when she's giving birth, all of a sudden the doctor rolls in, like, gives birth to my daughter and, like, is out in 10 seconds. And he drives out. Everything's fine.
Wow.
And now it's like 2 or 3 in the morning. And here I am in this little hospital. And the nurses said, no, we're not going to let you go home tonight. It's just too dangerous on the roads. And they set me up a little cot.
Oh, wow.
Right in the room where my daughter was, which was like me and her. Like she's in that little crib. And I'm like lying there hearing gunshots in the distance and Kingston night and thinking to myself, this is the moment that is the realest moment. This is when it's real. I'm staring at my little baby daughter and, you know, I'm, you know, living this dream. You know, it's dangerous night and, you know, I'm just worried about, you know, the morning and getting back, you know, getting everybody home safe. And it's just, I thought to myself, you know, it doesn't get any realer than this, does it? I'm all in.
No kidding, man. Yeah, wow, that's absolutely amazing, man. Yeah, like I said, it's amazing to talk to you. You almost feel like you're there. I mean, for a second, I just imagine laying in a hospital room, hearing gunshots with my newborn. That's that's about the most intense shit I think I've heard on this podcast, man. That's absolutely incredible. But you know, a lot of people don't associate, you know, the roots music, you know, where it was born, where it was birthed, you know, with that, and that's why I appreciate what you're saying, because it's you know, it lets people know, you know, this is reality versus, you know, what, you know, people kind of have, you know, the preconceived notions in their head. So can I ask you a question real quick? Something that I heard a while back, and I've mentioned it a couple of times on this podcast, and I just want to know, because I did some research and I'm kind of sure that it's true, but you can definitely tell me. And so if you find like a 7-inch, you know, a reggae 7-inch, and the artist's name is scratched off on it, is it true that a lot of the selectors in the dance halls would do that? So if people were like looking at their records, so they wouldn't know who the artist was, so they couldn't like take that record and use it in their dance hall. So if I found like an old Jamaican or an old reggae 7-inch with the name scratched out, was that done intentionally? Because I've heard, you know, from a couple of sources that was kind of something that they did, you know, so that the selector playing in the dance hall would be able to, you know, to play it. But if somebody looked over and like, who's that? I want to play that in my dance hall. They wouldn't be able to immediately know who it was. Have you ever heard that before?
I have not heard that rumor. You know, I'm not I'm more entrenched in the roots culture than the sound system culture. Although I've been to so many
Yeah, I
dances,
heard.
being in Kingston.
Yeah, right.
Someone in the industry, I do know that sometimes the record companies, on returns or things like that, they'll scratch out something on a record so no one else can resell it.
Ah,
And
okay. All right.
that was in the day of CDs, or they'll punch a hole in the cover, or they'll do something kind
Mm-hmm.
of to recognize, or
All right.
so maybe it has something to do with that, or
Okay.
but I couldn't. But a lot of the times, how it works. A lot of the dancers, what the selectors, especially in Kingston back in the day, would have the white labels, so they would cut the dubs
Yes. Yes.
direct.
100%.
So and they would write a
Yep.
little in a code, on there that they only may, they'd have a magic marker. It's not like they printed out the labels on a lot of these dubs where they played.
Right. Right.
So they'd have their own little
Dub like
coding
that.
of, Cuddy Ranks would be, they'd have the CR or whatever it would be, or the rhythm or whatever it would be. So, you know, keep prying eyes off what they were playing.
That's awesome, man. Well, cool. Like I said, I had to ask it because who better to ask than someone that was there immersed in the culture. Right on, man. So let's kind of let's do a little hop, skip, and a jump here. I got a question about the project. Reggae celebrates the Grateful Dead. How did that project come together? Because that's extremely interesting. From I wouldn't call myself like a massive Deadhead. I do love the Grateful Dead. My wife is a Deadhead, straight up. But how did that project come together? Because that's absolutely it's interesting, and it's just fantastic. Just even the name is amazing.
So basically around 94, 95, after I had been living in Kingston for a few years and producing, I
Yeah.
started my Henry K label, producing 45s. We're just talking about them right now. I think I have a couple
Yes.
around the
Yes,
place
amen.
right now. So I've been putting out 45s
Beautiful.
on
I
my
got three
label.
hanging up above me.
So I was hustling them out of my car and just trying to build a little name for myself as a producer. And
That's great.
I ended up bringing I think it was Half Pint or someone took me to a meeting at hold on one second. Took me to a meeting in New York City for a label called
Yeah.
Powwow Records, which is a small little indie out of New
Right on.
York. And we just hit it off, and they asked me to send them some of my product, and I did. And they asked me to go, even though I was living in Kingston, to kind of go back and forth between there and New York to be their A&I director. So we started putting out some albums, some
Wow.
compilations. I put out Everton Blender's first record in America, Blend'em, which we distributed that. Putting out a lot of Tony Rebel, a lot of Garnett Silk, a lot of the young artists that I was kind of
Oh man.
I
Ooh.
was into in Kingston at the time because I became friends with Garnett and Tony Rebel and worked with a lot of those artists
Wow.
within that group.
That's
So
amazing.
so
Garnet
so
Silk, they brought that dance hall, the roots, kind of that blended, kind of like the bridge between the dance hall, the conscious dance hall. There you go.
conscious
That's amazing, man.
exactly.
Very.
On
Wow.
those 90s dancehall rhythms, he was singing
Yes.
those beautiful songs. So anyway, so I was putting out these records. We were doing very well with the compilations and singles. And then one day they said, if you had a dream to do any kind of record you want, what would you do? And they say, listen, I was a Deadhead growing up, and without doubt,
Yeah.
every concert you'd go see the Dead in the parking lot, Deadheads would be jamming, Marley and Tosh and
Yeah.
Black Uhuru, and
Hell
they'd
yeah.
all be wearing.
Yes.
You'd have plenty of white rastas, and you'd have every kind
Yeah.
of reggae T-shirt out there. I said, what I would do is I would do a compilation where I'd get the A-list reggae artists to do Grateful Dead songs, and basically,
Beautiful.
I think there'd be an amazing crossover for that. So they said, put a budget together, put the idea together, and I went in. We used the band, an 80s, 90s iconic band named Chalice as the backing band to do a lot of the tracks, along with a
Nice.
musician up in New York named Joey Mosk, who at the time played with one of the great reggae cover bands, the great Dead cover bands, Zen Tricksters, up in New York City.
Right on.
So we had this blend of musicians that were Dead / reggae. And the first project, it was Mighty Diamonds, Toots Hibbert, Michael Rose, Dennis Brown. So we got a lot of
Oh,
it.
Michael, yes, Michael
So
Ruru.
we and literally from the moment it came on, it was at the top of the reggae Billboard charts. So we did a volume 2, which also had the Wailing
Crazy.
Souls, Gregory Isaacs. It just had a lot of the great reggae artists I got a chance to work with, great musicians, and basically between volume 1 and volume 2, it was like averaging 2 or 3,000 records a week. During the day, it was
Oh,
top of the
wow.
charts. It was selling like crazy through the Grateful Dead catalog. Was selling them as well.
Sure.
And really, the idea was at the time, I thought that you had a lot of A-list reggae artists, like a band like Chalice or Judy Mowat or even the Mighty
Yes,
Diamonds
I mean, yes.
or Mighty Diamonds, who maybe your typical Grateful Dead fan would hear their voice and they'd recognize, but they wouldn't know the bands per se. So
Sure.
my goal was to think that this would be a great way to introduce a lot of these reggae bands to an American audience that loves reggae, but now they'd have a chance to kind of have a more nuanced look at an artist that, doing a track that they're familiar with, but getting to hear their sound. So it introduced a whole kind of a whole array of artists now from Jamaica to a new audience. So that
Okay.
was
Nice.
the plan.
It's a beautiful plan, man. Right on. And so why do you think that reggae and the Dead's culture are connected so naturally? I mean, I could give, a couple of answers. Obviously, the ganja, but
Oh,
what's
yes.
let's go a little bit deeper into that. Everybody can say, oh, the weed. But what like on a little bit deeper level connected the Dead culture and reggae so naturally, in your opinion?
Well, so I cover this on a few shows too, because remember now I have a first-hand look. I was in the studio with a Freddie McGregor or a Judy Mowat doing a Dead song.
Yes, right on.
So
Beautiful.
first, above everything else, it's musicianship. Remember, okay, the audience loves music. These are music enthusiasts, whether it's reggae or Grateful Dead. So let's look at the audience
Right.
first of all. They like music. They like music that's uplifting. They like music that's
Yeah.
culturally connected and connected to the world. And I think that just from a musical point of view, the audience, what reggae and Grateful Dead has is just authentic music from the heart, which is what we're talking about before.
Beautiful.
We're talking about
Yes, sir.
musicians who are living life and what they're singing about and what they're playing is how they're living their life. And an audience can capture
Right.
that in a second. A Deadhead audience realizes these aren't, a bunch of, college frat boys, on stage playing. These are hippies. These are hippies.
Yes.
These are people
Amen.
who live, Bob Weir, God, rest in power, Bob, and Jerry Garcia and
Yes.
that band. They were the counterculture. Okay, they were in the
Amen.
heart of, Haight Ashbury. They were living that life. They were protesting the war. Their audience was,
Amen.
was waking up to psychedelics and waking up
Yep.
to,
Nah.
cultural
Still are.
justice and social justice and and
Yes.
connected to the world. And the same thing with the reggae audience. The reggae audience, this is authentic music from the ghetto, from a place that comes, the greatest hardships and the greatest struggles. These artists were able to create just something joyful and uplifting and positive in a lot of cases. And again, so you have this authentic music from the heart at the core of what connects them. And then you also have, like we're talking about, the social and political and cultural aspects of all musics, which they're connected to as well. The Grateful Dead being part of the counterculture and the revolution and
Yeah.
rebellion. And reggae is all
That's
about
right.
revolution and rebellion. It's about fighting the system.
100%, my friend.
So basically,
Yes.
we have this system that's out there, and they're doing the absolute best to, stifle creativity, and they're doing their absolute
That's right.
best to stifle positivity and individuality.
That's right.
and what they're
Especially
trying
now.
to do, yeah, they're trying to divide us in every which way possible. And what reggae
That's right.
and rock and the Grateful Dead, it's mending and it's healing and it's trying to do its best to bring people back together. So I think that was the
Yes.
connection, and those records did very well. I think even to this day they never even came out digitally, but even to this day they were the best-selling Jamaican cover records in history in Billboard charts. And then afterwards, what happens, of course, because here I was in Jamaica doing my little thing, distributing my records, kind of like I would talk about blending in, kind of driving around, and then all of a sudden these records explode, and then everything changes. Then all of a sudden the spotlight's on me down there, in the studios with the artists.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, of course, everybody, Island Record, Sly and Robbie start doing a Reggae Police.
Yes.
And then, the Easy Dub All Stars out of New York do the dub Side of the Moon. And all of a sudden it becomes like more of a business to start doing these cover records. All the record companies start,
Right.
approaching me, and it kind of loses its mystique a little bit after a while.
Sure.
But I was very proud of those records, and and they do have a cult following.
Yes. It's absolutely amazing, man. That you were just talking about the kind of the bridge between reggae and the Grateful Dead being the counterculture, and just the music of resistance and social justice. It was amazing. About 6 months ago, I had Billy Mystic on from the Mystic Revealers, and they were about to go on another tour, and had put out a new album, and I had asked him, let's get into the new music. He goes, you know what? We can get into the new music. He's like, but we didn't even really need to make any new music. He said, because the music that we made 30 years ago, he's like, is still just as valid today as it was 30 years ago. He's like, I thought in 30 years there's going to be no need for reggae music anymore. You know what I mean? Our message is going to get out. The world's going to be good. Everything's going to be fine. He's like, it's just as screwed up, if not worse now, as it was before. And that's why I say at the beginning of my show, the music is just as valid today as it was in the 60s when the first reggae records were released in Jamaica. And, I think it's a beautiful thing that, the Grateful Dead fans, and the reggae fans were kind of able to, see both sides and understand that, this is, matters of social justice, matters of resistance, matters of revolution, matters of anti-war, and the things that are going on today, it's probably more important, or just as important. I wouldn't say more important, but just as important now, because, we would think that we as a society would have learned by now, but for some reason it's amazing to me, and I'm not going to get too political, but but thank God, one of my favorite reggae bands, Cultivated Mind, and the lead singer Tony Brand had a great quote. He said, reggae music is the last bastion of the People's Army. He's like, that's the one weapon that they have not taken from us yet, and they can't, and they will not. But it is, I look at reggae music as a weapon. It's not in the insane, crazy cut somebody's head off sense, but I mean it's a weapon that can be used and utilized. That's why sometimes it's, if you have a platform to be able to have a message, pick and choose, your message wisely, because people are listening, and your words have power. Words sound power. And, I think it's very important today to use that weapon of reggae music, what it was created for, which is resistance, which is social justice. It's for the people, not just one people. It's for all people, man. And it's an absolutely beautiful thing, which is why I love so much what you do. But let's get into RootsLand, man. Let's get into RootsLand.
Actually,
I've got,
as you say that right now, I have a good segue,
Yeah.
because the last episode is called Babylon by Bus, as a matter of fact.
yes, fantastic. Please listen. Yep.
And we were, we're talking about, every generation Babylon takes new forms, evolves, and it seems like now in the day of artificial intelligence, in the day of this,
Yes.
digital systems taking over. Sorry, hold on one second. In the day of digital systems
Yeah, bro.
kind of taking over, taking over our world in a lot of different ways.
Right. Right.
It's like there's Babylon messing with my camera right now.
No, you're
but
fine.
but anyway, so what happened? What happens now? Oh crap! So in the days. Hold on one sec here.
If you're listening on Spotify, hop over to the YouTube channel because you got it. This is the fun part. This is why I love recording video, man.
Just as you're talking about Babylon, all of a sudden my camera starts acting up on me.
Yeah, right. That is by design, man. I'm telling you.
Yeah. Anyway, so anyway, what I was saying is that yeah. So Babylon by bus, and I use the analogy when kind of like Bob Marley puts out this album Babylon by bus. That title.
Right.
Has all kinds of meaning. This was basically his live album. Here he was, a bunch of Rastafarians going through Europe by bus.
Right.
What's more common? What's more ordinary or unprotected than just a bus, an ordinary bus traveling through Babylon? He wasn't coming through with armies or conquering. What he was coming through was music and songs and ideas and revolution.
Yes.
And think about what a lasting effect that had. And when you talk
Yes.
about right now resistance and the last bastion of resistance, that's the way you have to take on in this world of Babylon and systems and artificial intelligence and all kinds of things happening and things that we can't really fight with an army. We have this beautiful template that these reggae artists set out for us where they kind of showed us how we fight it. We build communities and we come in, blending in and undercover in our little buses and our little minivans, okay?
Yes.
And we bring
I
our
love
music.
this.
We bring our music and we bring our songs and we bring everything that's important and our culture to, person to person and face to face, not in this digital world where we're kind of limited to, a screen but that's how reggae built up in the old days. That's how it's reached every nook and cranny. There was no internet back then. There was no digital world back then. This was the old-fashioned way. It started out in clubs and on community radio stations and newspapers and little publications where people Reggae Report and The Beat and little magazines where people started in their basements. Okay, that's how the revolution.
Yes.
That's how it continues right now, with technology, with the system, with everything just growing so powerful and so strong, and the ability for the common man to fight it becomes ever so more difficult. We go back to learn these lessons of what our ancestors and our forefathers and our mentors taught us, and that seems like reggae set the template up in creating this community of people who become part of a family with a shared consciousness and a shared vision. So just like you're saying, it is the last bastion because people who listen to this music are spiritually connected, and they do have a certain kind of
amen.
They have a commonality to us where we see the world as a place of love and hope and togetherness.
Yes.
And so I think
absolutely
I agree with that quote. What you're saying, and so what I'm trying to do with our show. The first 6 seasons or 7 seasons, a lot of them were, the actual experiences of living and working and being in the studio, and not only the artists but all the external people I meet outside the studio. The rude boy gangsters who found me a place to live, and the girls in the dance hall, and just a lot of the people that make Jamaica what it is. But as we move into now, seasons 9 and 10, it becomes a kind of more, how do we take these lessons that we've learned from these great teachers of reggae and of music and of Jamaican culture and apply them to this world? Because, like you said, life is a circle and things repeat themselves, and Babylon reinvents themselves. Babylon reinvents
absolutely
itself. The struggles and the things that they were going through back in the day, we're about to go through and we're going through right now. And the lessons from
That's right.
this music and this culture need to continue. So
Right.
that's what we're trying to do with our show, and trying to bring their voices, keep them relevant.
Yes. Absolutely, 100%. And you do a fantastic job, and that's why I think what you do is so beautiful. And we were talking about a couple of my podcasts that you had listened to before. One of the Harrison Stafford, and I'd ask. We were talking about the importance of the elders. You know what I'm saying? And that's why Harrison, and Groundation. If you're familiar with Groundation's music, he's like, I could have one of the newer, reggae artists. I could do a collab with them, and get a million streams. He's like, but I feel like, that's why he has, the Abyssinians and, all of the, he brings back the elders to do the collaborations with. He's like, because these are the voices that I feel that people need, to hear, and that even if they have passed or soon will pass, or, that these voices need to be heard. This is, it's a beautiful thing, and it's, I've, just the child of the revolution, man. I've said this before. I was a member of Greenpeace when I was 11 years old, and Refuse and Resist, and the October 22nd Coalition to Stop Police Brutality, and the RCP, and just it's in my blood. It's who I am, and it's a beautiful thing, and that's why I was so attracted to reggae music. I grew up surfing, and Peter Tosh was my first introduction to reggae music. Well, obviously Bob Marley, but Peter's what really, really, really got me into it. His the cassette tape Legalize It. We blew that thing up. We listened to it so many times, but it's a beautiful thing, and it's when I heard the music, I loved it, but then the message just it's stuck. It became a part of who I was, and I think it's an absolutely beautiful thing. And that's why I love what RootsLand is doing.
On the subject of Peter Tosh,
yes.
Last year I went down to his birthday bash. They keep a Peter Tosh Day down by where he was born in Jamaica, in the
nice
in southern Jamaica, in Bluefields Bay. So
nice.
I flew into Kingston, and I was driving across with a couple of artists who I've worked with, and we were talking about the murder of Tosh and all the various rumors and urban legends surrounding his death.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time we reached from Kingston to Sav Lamar, we were like, there's a lot of actually unanswered questions, a lot of things that have kind of been really brushed over. So 2 seasons ago, I did a really in-depth look at his murder, and went through Supreme Court. I went through the Supreme Court appeal of his murder. Went through page by page, looked at police reports, went back and listened to interviews, and I have to say, I have a petition right now actually to reopen the case, but Roger Steffens came in. We did an interview. There's a lot of fingers that point that there's a lot more than just that this is a robbery gone awry, which is what the press the popular story is, because
a robbery of his home, right? Yeah.
It was a grudge with an old friend, evidently, that Peter went back on a deal, so the man turned up at his house and killed him. But it turns out it was a lot deeper, and I recommend everybody, if they're interested, take a listen to Wanted, Dredd or Alive that season. But there was actually three men who showed up at his house that night to kill him, and more than Peter Tosh, there were a lot of people that were shot in the head that night. It was almost like it was a hit, and it was a lot of unanswered
Doc
questions.
Brown, right?
Yeah, Doc Brown was hit and was killed
Free
that
Eye,
night.
I think, yeah.
Free Eye, the radio. And it turns out that Peter Tosh and Free Eye were in discussion to start the first reggae radio station in Jamaica during a very political time.
It's fucking crazy.
And there was all the talk about how much power that station would have, and the powers that be that were threatened. So it was very interesting. So I mean, I hope it gets a lot more coverage, but I really would like to see the Governor General of Jamaica open back up the Peter Tosh investigation because,
Yeah.
he didn't get justice, and even his killer who went to
Right.
jail. I looked into it. I have a friend who works at Jamaican Prison Association who says that the killer Peter Tosh died in prison, and then I have another source from the streets of Kingston that said he was poisoned in the ghetto in Trenchtown, which is crazy because
Okay.
whoever knew
So
that
right there is a
so there's all kinds of conflicting
Yeah.
reports of how his killer even died and if he even died or where he's buried or anything
Right.
like that. So it's just a very interesting story, like everything that's Jamaica. And it comes back down to what we were saying earlier and what I'm trying to uncover with Rootsland and what you're trying to do with your show with promoting reggae music is that there's this battle that's going on right now. And the system is
It's
really
amazing.
trying to do its best to kind of,
Yes.
keep a world hidden, a world that can really,
Right.
be useful right now. This
Yeah.
this culture and this wisdom and this knowledge that's being suppressed, on purpose. So, I think that
On purpose. Yes.
absolutely, there's a definite, there's a will to keep this thing down, and it's just
Yes. And yes.
the more you dig deep into it, the more you realize that what's going on. So.
And that's why I love Rastafari so much because, not to me, but, the basis of it is, it's in order to take something down, you have to start from, the foundation, correct? You can't, if you want to take something down, if you want to, destroy the house, you don't, rip the roof off and, the house is destroyed. No, you have to start from the foundation, and the foundation is, a lot of it's just oppression, black oppression, colonization. But we have to, we still have to, as a society, get to that point and address that first. And I firmly don't believe that that's been, addressed, with things like that, or the framing of political prisoner Muya Abu Jamal, for the same thing. It's like he was. He's framed, he's in prison, for something that he didn't do. But regardless, it's just the system is built on tyranny, it's built on racism, and it just doesn't have to be, the system, over here in the United States or in Europe. It's just the whole tyrannical system is built on oppression, and until that is even faced and challenged, we can have all these social programs and all this beautiful stuff, in place. But until we actually address the core issue, nothing's going to change. And that's unfortunate, but I think that's and something else that's wild to me, and this probably has nothing to do with anything, but his death was on 9/11. So it's so every day that we're in America that we're thinking about what happened in 9/11. We can also now anybody listening to the show also remember and celebrate the life of Peter Tosh.
Yeah,
so 100%, man.
I'll send you the link to the petition. And you can put it in your show notes.
Oh, great. Oh, 100%. Yes.
Because, like I said, this
I'll
is
talk about it on every single show.
And it's a matter of fact, Peter Tosh, when, I also did a little special. I recommend everybody. I did a series on Cali Roots. I went out there 2024 to see Cali Roots just for myself because I didn't want to necessarily praise or criticize anything until I saw it firsthand. But what I did notice, and when we're going back to Peter Tosh, there must have been 1,000 people handing out samplers of cannabis, of spliffs and candies and gummies and all that stuff. And the way that cannabis culture and that way that cannabis culture and let's say the Cali roots scene, for instance, okay, or the West Coast reggae scene, the way they're so interweaved, and yet. They pay no tribute at all to someone like Peter Tosh or to Hibbert, these founding fathers or Marley, who literally Peter Tosh went to prison and had his head bashed in for ganja. This man was promoting legalize it and promoting cannabis having medicinal uses before any medical community stepped up.
Yes,
okay?
yes.
And these forefathers
only cure for glaucoma, man.
Yeah, and and when you see all these companies, now benefiting off the literally blood, sweat, and tears that these early reggae artists went out,
Right.
and people looking at them like they're crazy. And what do you mean cannabis
Yeah.
can help out? And they're like saying, no, you can have
Right.
tea and you can have, tonics and you can have tincture, And they were saying this for decades
Yeah.
before it legalized. So the thing that upset me is pay a little homage to the masters and the ones who really set this plate
Right.
for you to be able to dine off of. These early reggae guys, especially when it came to cannabis
Yes.
culture, they do not get the credit that they deserve. There should be a hall of fame.
No,
You know what I'm
amen.
saying? That these are the guys that
Yes.
the reason why we're legal right now is because of these guys who fought for it. So
That's exactly right,
So-
man.
so
They
Tosh-
laid, yes, absolutely.
Tosh really deserves a lot of credit on a lot of levels for what he did, and never really got his due. Because he was kind of like in the
Right.
Marley shadow for a long time.
Sure. But they were, I mean, they were, to me, it's together, yes, absolutely beautiful. But they were, Bob Marley obviously is, the pioneers, he is just the guru. But Peter Tosh was, the one thing that everybody, what was your introduction to reggae? Everybody's Bob Marley, and of course that's a beautiful, gorgeous introduction to reggae. But what got me into it really was the militants, and a lot of people, they when they hear the word militant, they think, oh, machine guns and fuck, like, let's go out and kill.
Mm-hmm.
No. Militants just means standing up for what you believe in and being serious about it. You know what I mean? And having a hardline stance on it. And I appreciated Peter Tosh's militants. That's why I was like, man, this guy he's a driving force. He's practices what he preaches. He's behind it. And I liked that. It was a little more hardline, and that's what I kind of gravitated towards. But I think that's a beautiful thing. And kind of mentioning the like going back to what you were talking about, the Cali roots. There's a lot of bands that I'll interview, or a lot of guys that I'll talk to, especially being a musician, playing in a reggae band. They're like, I'm like, you're a reggae band. No, we're not. We're not a reggae band. We're, I guess reggae adjacent. Well, to me, it seems like, and I've had this conversation with Tony Brand on my show quite a few times, it's like you were reggae when it helped you. But now that you're in the scene and you're kind of established, like, you want to have your own sound. No, we're not reggae anymore. It's like, there's a difference between, appropriation and appreciation. Don't appropriate, then not appreciate. You know what I mean? It's, if you're going to be in the culture and you're going to play the music and you're going to live the life, then do it. Just don't, use something as a stepping stone, especially when people like Peter Tosh fucking died for this message. You know what I mean? Like, this is serious on a lot of fronts. And it's, it's, the war and the fight is still going on, and these elders, these musicians, these pioneers, like you said, need to be recognized. You know what I mean? It's kind of a shame that they're not. It's like stepping over them almost. Well, thank you for what you did. Let me just go ahead and push you to the side so I can do what I'm going to do, and that's absolutely insane to me.
Well,
you know what I mean? And that's why.
Not only is it insane, but it has a cost. First of all, like I said, I've been in Jamaica for decades. I've been in this music business for a long time, and I've seen a lot of them. I've seen a lot of bands that are hot for a minute, but they come and go. The ones that the ones that appropriate, they don't stay around for that long. Or they're gone in a generation. There's some the ones that really are feeling it, the ones that are really meaning it. They're the ones that really last over time, but there's a cost to becoming reggae adjacent, because what happens is, everything gets separated by a few degrees. First it's hardcore roots, then it becomes, Cali roots, and then it becomes, reggae rock or modern reggae, and then it becomes AI.
Right, sure.
And the reason why an AI, a generic form of AI, can go out right now and have 25 million streams on a song let's say like "Let Babylon Burn" or something like you put into ChatGPT.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Think of a good reggae name. Okay, I and I, or "Let Babylon Burn," and you put a
Right.
prompt in that says, "Give me a soulful, acoustic sounding song that's going to move people, give it a little bit of authentic reggae feel, but mix it with a little bit of a rock, progressive feel," and all of a sudden it can get 25 million streams because it's
Isn't that
gone
crazy?
to all these stages in between. It's gone from roots to something a little softer to something a little softer.
Right.
Where now people are conditioned that anything that comes out that just has a little ska guitar in it, well, that's reggae. Or it just has a little bit of a reggae
Right.
accent to it or a title to it. It goes into the reggae category.
Yeah.
It goes into the
Yeah.
algorithm as reggae.
Right.
So I think there's a cost to having, reggae, when you want to say watered down or degrees
Right.
of separation, because what it does is eventually it allows what the next step is going to be. Eventually it's going to be reggae music,
Right.
where people are,
Right. Yeah.
it's going to
Right.
reach the point where it's so generic
Yeah,
and so
that's
watered
absolutely
down
right.
where it's like, all right, is this, Bruno Mars, or is this, it becomes
Right.
so commercial, and so the more it gets away from the roots, the more it does lose meaning, and the more that
Yes.
And the question I do ask, again, and we're not going to judge here, does someone go to a Cali Roots festival and say, "Oh my God, this is great. I want to go dig deeper into the roots," having seen that? Well, then that's great if that's what it does. If someone
Yes.
sees a stick figure and says,
Right.
"Oh wait, I want to go hear the Abyssinians now," or "I want to go hear, the
Yeah.
Mighty Diamonds because I've just
Mhm.
opened myself up to the world of reggae." Well, that's what it's supposed to do. If
Yeah.
that's what it does, then great.
Yes, it is. Right.
But if what it's
Right.
doing is, in fact, taking spots away from the Abyssinians or the Mighty Diamonds or whatever
Right.
young reggae
Right.
band is going on tour, because now, there's no room for them because you have all these other bands on this concert or on this festival, so you can't have any authentic reggae because, they just
Right.
don't have the following or the numbers or the streams to warrant them being on the show. Well, then it hurts. Then if they're
Right.
taking valuable slots away
Yes.
from music that is authentic and real and needs a break. So those are the questions that have to be asked when you have a Cali Roots. Have more than 2 or 3 reggae
Right.
bands. I know it costs a little money to bring them up, and the visa's a little problem, but spend it.
Yeah, but then again, a $9 bottle of water should be able to cover that.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah, and all the T-shirts and all the sweatshirts.
that they're selling.
That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. That we have there's room for everybody under the tent, but make room. I went to Cali Roots. They should,
Right.
even if Jamaican Tourist Board, or they should have a vending section for Jamaican artists who even aren't there to sell some merchandise.
Sure. Sure.
They should have, like I said, pay homage.
Sure.
They should have an herb tent where they pay homage to the real people who suffered to get cannabis legalized. They should have a minimum
Yes.
of how many, ghetto artists or reggae artists they have from Jamaica per festival. It doesn't have to be a third of the festival, 10, 12, but bring a handful. So I just think that there's
Right.
room, like you said. It's okay that you have people out there who are, appreciating and appropriating, but you still have to go pay homage to the ones who are
Right.
doing. You still have to keep the roots going in Jamaica, because that's where this whole tree comes from. And people, anytime
That's exactly
you have,
right.
anytime that these promoters or these festivals in America or these radio stations can promote a good, authentic Kingston or Jamaican reggae group, that's going to help them in the long run. That's exciting for reggae. That helps
Yes.
the music. That people are paying attention to what's going on in Jamaica. That here's a new group. Here's maybe the next Marley. Here's the next Tosh. Get them out on tour. Get them
Right.
out to some of these festivals. That's a story that people want to hear. So I think
Yes.
that would just. I just.
Do you
that,
think-
that this will help the whole scene.
Do you think that a lot of the the bands that are, and I'm kind of getting off of my questions, I just that call themselves maybe reggae adjacent, or kind of use we're a reggae band, we're not anymore. You think maybe it's the deep rooted message that if you call yourself reggae, you associate with reggae, that, you know, it's that maybe they might be a little, I wouldn't say the word afraid, but kind of reluctant to attach themselves to, because it is about revolution. It is about social justice. It is about, you know, bringing, you know, Babylon down from its foundation. Yeah, a lot of it, you know, very Rastafari based, and you don't have to be, you know, Rastafari to play reggae music. But, you know, do you think a lot of, you know, people maybe aren't ready to hold that message and carry that torch, you know, because it's a torch, man, and it's burning red hot.